Today we are talking all about how to design your land using basic permaculture principles. My name is Jessica.
And I'm Jag.
And this is Copper Desert Homestead. We are a family of 5 moving from the suburbs to start a homestead on raw land. Jag has just completed a permaculture design certification course, and it was pretty intensive. The final part of his course was to do a final design project, which he was able to use our piece of land as his project. Tell them a little bit about the course that you took. What did it entail?
It was 3 days a week for 4 months.
Mm-hmm.
And they had a good outline for the class. They started you off kind of going through the basics of permaculture and some principles to follow, which we can talk about.
Mm-hmm.
And then they kind of gave you like a step-by-step of things to look at. Everything's going to change for each piece of land or property. They went from rural designs to urban designs to even like community and social designs. You didn't even have to have like a physical piece of property to design. You could have done it purely around getting like a community together. So obviously for our land, I did a rural design. So
Yeah. So yes, people will be doing designs based on their environment, but permaculture uses a lot of techniques that are ancient historically and culturally, but what it does is it kind of puts them into a replicable process, right? Because there's certain steps which we're going to take you through as we go through his PowerPoint, and I will put the slides up for you so that way you can start to think what you need to be looking at for your piece of property, whether it's yours, whether it's a community, whether it's urban, whether it's rural, and how you use permaculture to design it. How would you define permaculture, like briefly?
it's a combination of permanent and agriculture or culture. It's kind of used between both. And it's a mindset, a set of values, and some principles to follow.
Sort of something more sustainable as well, right? So instead of, we're kind of living in this day and age where we're very into mono-agriculture, into forcing our environment to do what we want it to do, whereas permaculture seeks to repair the damage that's been done from that by working with the land to repair it.
Mm-hmm. And just working with our environment instead of forcing it to do what we want. So with monocrop stuff, you're wiping out everything and then putting in a single plant. Corn, beans, trees. It's very singular. With permaculture, you want to integrate what naturally happens in a forest. You want ground cover, brush, trees. Everything is interconnected through multiple points.
So permaculture talks about using a web-like design as opposed to something more monolithic like mono-agriculture. You really want to think about everything you're using in your design because everything should have multiple uses and it should all be interconnected so that if one or two things do fail due to weather, due to breaking, due to finances, I don't know, wildlife, whatever, you still have a web, you're still supported. Both you as a person and your family, and also the land is still supported and all the animals on it. So that's something that we really liked about permaculture and a reason why we want to use it on our land. So do you want to go ahead and talk us through the presentation?
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
You want to, with the design, there's a scale of permanence in permaculture design. So you start with the things that are very hard for you to change: elevation, geography, growing zone. You start off with the things you can't change, and that leads you into more information. That'll bring you towards your highs and lows temperature-wise throughout the year. It'll give you your average rainfall. You can find out your monsoon seasons, stuff like that.
Okay.
So once you have the big stuff, Then you'll want to identify things that interact or directly like correspond to your property, your land, stuff like that. So we call these sectors. So how does the sun interact with your property in the winter, in the summer, through spring and fall? What's the wind like? Do you have neighbors? Is there wildlife? Is there street traffic? Is there uh
Or even like, where are your views?
yeah,
What view do you want to have?
your view could be part of it. After that, you'll want to do like a zone analysis on your property. Your home would be like zone 0. You're always going to be in your home. You're going to interact with it every day. You wake
Mm-hmm.
up in it, you go to sleep in it, you eat in it. So the lower the zone number, the more interactive you are. The farther you get from your zone, if you have an orchard, that could be more like a zone 3-ish, which is
Mm-hmm.
something you'd only interact with once a week, once or twice a month. Wilderness would be like a zone 5. That's something you don't really have an impact on and don't really want to affect too much.
Yeah.
It could just be a place where you hike and forage and look for refuge. You want to do a zone analysis on your property.
Okay. So the zones, to be clear, start from 0 to 5.
Mm-hmm.
0 being the zone you interact with the most, which would probably be your house, and then going out from there.
You do a pre-zone.
Okay.
So you figure out what the zones are currently, and then as you get more information, when you start to design it a little bit later, you can adjust those zones to fit your design.
Okay.
So what we went into next was a water analysis for the land. How does water interact with our land?
Mm.
When it rains, do for other properties it could be, do you have a stream that runs through? Is it running all the time? Is it only running in the rainy season? Um, do you have any water sources like city water, a well,
Yeah.
anything like that? So there's nothing on our land. So our water analysis was purely rainfall and what does the water do when it falls on our land. And so we get like 9 to 13 inches of precipitation a year.
Mm-hmm.
And uh, late summer, early fall is our monsoon season. So that's when we're going to be getting most of our water.
Mm-hmm.
And in our map, I just showed where the water drains.
So what is source and what is sink?
So source is like where it's coming from, which
Mm-hmm.
is the rain. But the places I labeled source in our map are high points in the land,
Okay.
which is where water flows down to then all these blue lines are where the water congregates and flows to the sink, which the sink is where it
Okay.
either leaves your land or where it enters a bigger water source like a river.
Okay. What is next?
So after that, after you know what water's doing on your land, then you can start to make a plan for access and water flow around that access. So you have to be able to get to your home, to your orchard, to your fields, to your playground, whatever you're designing.
Mm-hmm.
And so water is the giver of life and it can take things away pretty quickly. So
Mm-hmm.
you don't want it washing out your road, flooding your house, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So planning access is one of the first big things that you want to think about in design and
And access meaning a road onto
a
your
road.
land, essentially. Okay.
Yeah. Um,
So, like, and we do have a video about talking more, really in depth about how we designed our road. But what were a few of the things we thought about to make sure our access was good with?
like I've already said, water is a big
Mm-hmm.
thing. The other was like what our soil and earth is like.
Mm-hmm.
So we have a lot of conglomerate in our property. It's a very thick, hard stone, um, hard to dig up and break through. It's kind of like concrete. So avoiding that was actually a big deal for us. We don't want to be having to dig and bust through it for anything really, or
Yeah. Like, that would be a waste of energy, essentially.
mm-hmm. And then there is a perk to it if you can place some kind of foundation or your road on top of it, I mean, it is like concrete. It won't erode.
So we kind of made our road go along the parts of the earth that were easy to bulldoze,
Mm-hmm.
but also areas that wouldn't get washed out. And the area that would have gotten washed out, we addressed with a culvert.
Mm-hmm.
Cool.
So then you make a plan for all that rainfall, or if you're in an urban environment, road runoff from a neighbor's roof, you start to make a plan for this water. Any water landing on your property is a free resource. It comes from God, so
Mm-hmm.
you don't have to pay for it. It's free. It's yours. Use it. If it's coming from a neighbor from the street, uh, there are some things to consider, like road pollution and stuff like that. But
Mm-hmm.
there are plants that will leach that stuff out and can still produce fruit, beans. Mesquite is an option, is a good example of that.
Okay. So you see where the water's coming from, and then what do you want to do with it?
You want to use it as best you can. So if that could go from a rain catch system that could supply water for your home, your plants, washing needs, things like that. It could uh, look like earthworks. You could shape your earth to store it in a place such as a pond or a swale, or even we we try to kind of avoid ditches that take the water away from our land, because it is a good resource to use.
Mm-hmm.
If you get too much, obviously you'll need to divert it elsewhere, but
Mm-hmm.
a slow diversion swale, which would be, it's technically a ditch, but the water moves very slowly, so it won't erode anything. It still has a good opportunity to sink in.
Yeah. And really, the best place to store water is in your soil because that becomes a future resource for any plants.
Mm-hmm.
Just to be clear, every roof that we have is what we're using to catch water, and it'll be caught in a gutter and then go into a big tank, and then we can connect that to a hose or a watering system, or we can clean it and use it as drinking water. So that's what we're going to do with our water.
Mm-hmm.
So that's called rainwater harvesting.
Yep.
So now we're going to get more into the zones.
So after you figure out your water plan, then you can come back to your zones and start to. This is a very broad way to think about finding fine tuning your details.
Mm-hmm.
So you start to figure out an area that you're going to be spending the most time in your home, back porch, front porch, that kind of area. Then you go to, so in our camper port,
Mm-hmm.
where we're going to be living in our camper while we build the house and all the other structures on the property, is going to be our zone one.
Mm-hmm.
Very close to that will be small kitchen garden, fitness area, kids play area, that kind of stuff.
Yeah. And I
Right.
guess I should say, I know earlier we said 0 to 5, but in this one, it's actually zone 1 to 5.
Zone 0 is kind of like, it's usually classified as like inside your home. Zone 1 includes your home
Oh,
and the surrounding area.
okay. Okay. Thanks for
So,
clarifying.
yeah.
Okay.
And
Sorry.
then
Anyways.
some examples for ours is zone 2, something that we would probably interact with on almost a daily schedule or daily, would be things like the chicken coop. Uh, my wife drew for hunting, bow hunting for the first time this year. So we need to go get her a bow, but an archery range, because I practice
We want
every
to
day.
practice every day.
So that'll be in zone 2.
You have our food forest.
Mm-hmm.
So, food forest, that's a pretty permaculture-y term. So,
Mm-hmm.
do you want to explain what a food forest is?
Yeah, so you're trying to plant integrated things. So these would be perennial trees, bushes, and plants, as well as some annual plants. And hopefully, if you design your guilds pretty well, they'll all work and help each other. So the trees are the top story.
Mm-hmm.
Underneath them, you can get bushes. You can even have vines climbing up the trunks, things like that. Uh, Depending on the direction, um, throughout the year, the sun will hit certain spots and not others. So you can plant shade-loving plants
Mm-hmm.
in areas that will get more shade from the trees, and sun-loving plants in the area that the tree won't shade. And using these little design tactics, you can build little forests.
Yeah.
In I've they've They have them in urban environments, and then of course in rural.
Mm-hmm.
You can do mini ones even on like apartment balconies and stuff.
Yeah.
So these will give you different types of food. You can range from fruits and nuts to berries.
And so, yeah, so it's essentially doing, I mean, it's inspired obviously by a forest that occurs in nature and how the forest floor and the trees and the shrubs all work together. And it's a very complex system, but you can plant things to mimic a forest
Yep.
so that you eventually
That
have your
benefit,
own. That
yeah,
benefits you. Yeah. So
you,
you're,
your family,
yeah,
pollinator bugs. You want to attract
yeah.
butterflies and
Grazing
bees, and
animals.
yeah, if you want to bring it there are ways to, yeah, integrate even livestock that will come eat the understory of certain bushes
Mm-hmm.
or trees. And
And you'd put them out there for a certain amount of time or in a certain place so they're not overgrazing or trampling anything they shouldn't. But
mhm.
yeah, so that's fun.
And then as you branch a little farther out, it could be something like our guest camper, a obstacle running course.
So
These
this
are,
is zone 3.
yeah,
So
free range play.
yeah, meditation. This is just stuff that we want to do with ours. So it could be anything that you want, but it's something you don't necessarily have to go to every day, but it's still close.
Hmm.
So zone 4.
That would be, I labeled it as like a foraging area, and then training for longer runs and obstacle courses, which we like
Mm-hmm.
to do.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then zone 5, which is like your
The
wilderness area.
wilderness. Yeah.
That one would be like hunting, fishing, foraging, hiking.
Yeah. So you're not intervening in any way aside from just spending time in zone 5. And
Hmm.
zone 4 is still pretty out there. You don't need to be there every day. It's pretty low maintenance. But, maybe for some people they could have storage in their zone 4
Hmm.
or grazing animals that they don't need to tend to every day, stuff
And
like that.
and you won't have all the zones with every design. If you're in an urban or apartment area, you may only
Yeah,
have zone 1 and zone 2,
that's a
or
good point.
yeah. After that, after you figured out your zones is when you really get into even finer details. So for ours, this became my zone 1 design. So this is where all of the stuff we're going to interact with daily, I started to design with, and you have to consider and think about and use all of the things you've already done before, all of your
Mm-hmm.
sectors, all of the water data you found, all of that. So with ours, I also did like a rainwater harvesting calculation on every structure we're planning to build. So that's based off the square footage of the roof, how much water lands on those roofs. Um, there are some calculations that you can use. You can find some online. I
Mm-hmm.
used the calculations from Rainwater Harvesting by Brad Lancaster.
Mm. And so you can see in our design, for example, like our home, all the windows in our home are going to be facing south. Our garden is going to get good southeastern light, but it'll end up being more shaded during like the scorching heat of the day. We have where you see our trees and our food forest, we've put that in the direction that we get the most wind from, and it'll also provide shade during the heat of the day. So that we're using that not just for food, but to protect us and provide us with comfort and protect our structures. You can get as creative as you want. I mean, you should have fun with it, you
Yeah,
know?
yeah.
We hope that that helped to explain to you sort of the basics of a foundation of permaculture and how you can use it to design your land. We hope that you can see that it's meant to be sustainable. It's meant to use the strengths of your land. It's meant to work with the land, but it's also meant to be creative and innovative so that you can build just the home of your dreams, and the sky's the limit. So thanks for listening. Comment below with any questions and like and subscribe. It genuinely does help us to continue making this content. Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks.